Welcome! In this video, I'll be revising English literature and giving you some tips on how to do it yourself. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe and also comment below if you liked the video or found something to share. So let's begin. Number 1, as I always say, specification and subject guide is very important. You can go to quals or qualifications.pearson.com to get your specification. So I'm not going to go into much detail about each of these resources because I have a separate video about them which you can check from the description box or from the top right corner. The second most important tip is to check the past papers or the sample assessment materials and do those questions by yourself on a book or a piece of paper. Here I have my own book which I use for writing literature and English language answers. You can see I've made a key over here such as black pen for my answer, green pen for the correct points that are also in the mark scheme. Then below is the assessment objectives A1, A2, A3, A4, and then below that I've written the codes for each paper in the literature specification and the AOs that are covered in those papers, and then focus is basically the content that's assessed in each of these papers. So next up, after opening my book, I went to quals.pearson.com again and checked out a past paper from January 2019 I think, and then I started writing the answer. This is a time lapse, but originally I set a timer separately on my laptop for 45 minutes because that's the amount of time you get in the exam for writing this answer. So I did it, and then I found out I had 10 minutes left even after I finished it, but that was probably because I also left out some points as I realized later on after reading the mark scheme. So yeah, that brings me to my next point, mark schemes and examiner reports. They're very important. I use the mark scheme and examiner report to write down the mistakes and the points I missed, as you can see in green pen, and then later on I moved to highlighting the AOs in my answer. So AOs are basically assessment objectives which the examiners look for throughout your answer. So I highlight them just because it helps me to know if I did cover the required assessment objectives. The next tip is something which I do personally. You don't really need to do it, but I find it helps me, and that's making short notes on sticky notes, as you can see over here. So this is my wall of sticky notes where I stick the notes that I make, and this particular section is for inspector calls. However, at the moment I'm writing notes for Macbeth, the different scenes and acts of Macbeth, because I keep forgetting what happens in different scenes of different acts, etc. So I just summarized what happens in each scene, etc. I used a website called SparkNotes to write down these summaries, and we'll come to that later on in my video. Now this video is of the next day actually. I started making more notes, but about linguistic devices this time. So I got these linguistic devices from a website called LitCharts, and we'll also come to that later on in my video. So it's basically just a summary of each linguistic device, the ones that are usually the most important, because I usually keep forgetting what some, linguistic devices mean, etc. So after I made a few notes, I stuck them on the wall and I moved to making flashcards, which brings us to the next point. Make flashcards for quotes, themes, characters, etc. For some subjects, I use this website called Brainscape. There's also an app for it, I believe, and you can log in or create your account. As you can see, this is my account. I have flashcards for history and ICT. But for other subjects, I prefer to make physical flashcards, as I'm doing right now for literature. So since I didn't buy any ready-made flashcards from outside, I just made some myself using a thick A4 paper. In a moment, I'll just show you briefly how I make my flashcards, i.e. how I organize them, etc. So for now, this is just the time lapse of me doing it, and as you can see, I added some drawings as well, and I'm not good at drawing, so they didn't turn out too well. Anyway, I just thought I would add some illustrations because I wanted it to look a bit more colorful, but that didn't work out. Anyway. Okay, so after making some flashcards, I've now decided to show them to you. I'll just remove the pin over here, and as you can see, here's my deck or pile of flashcards, whatever you want to call them. And on the top over here, this is what I call a divider. You can call it whatever you want. It just says the subject of the flashcards, the topic. There's no topic in general for this pack of flashcards, so I wrote section B, anthology poetry, and then the AOs that it covers, AO2, AO3, and below that component 1, which means paper 1 of the literature iGCSE. Okay, so leaving that aside, let me show you my real flashcards now. So for example, over here it says relationship, which is a theme, and then I write a question, which poems cover this theme, and then the section that it covers, which is section B of paper 1 or component 1. If this was another subject like commerce, accounting, etc., I would usually write the chapter number from the specification. And then on the back, there's the answer. As you can see, there's the list of poems which cover the theme of relationship. And then there are some more flashcards on other themes such as good versus evil, isolation, childhood, etc. So in literature, themes are very important. There are many questions that appear on basis of themes, such as compare two poems which concern this theme, etc. So those are important. Now I'll just put this paper clip back. That's how I store my flashcards. I just put this paper clip, and yeah. Tip number 6. Write notes about how to answer the paper. So I do this online, on my laptop in an app called Bear. As you can see, these are my literature notes on how to answer questions in the papers. So the Bear app is really good. It allows you to organize your notes into categories or tags, etc. And I have a separate video entirely about the Bear app in my channel, and I'll link it in the description box. You'll also find it in the top right corner of this video. So I'm not going to explain my notes that much, but you can probably see that I've written stuff like the keywords to use in answers, such as suggest, highlight, etc., and how each paragraph should be structured, and about the PEE format, etc. So these are some key tips which I actually found in my English literature textbook, which is by Pearson. There's actually quite a lot of good information in the beginning of this book, which most people might tend to miss out because they usually only focus on the analysis of the poems and the other modern and literary heritage texts, etc. But you should really take out time to go through the entire book because it has many tips throughout it that can be easily missed. So this is the next tip, and probably something which I've said a lot in my previous videos. If you don't feel productive, there are lots of YouTube channels which you can check out, such as Mr. Brough, Mr. Sal's Teaches English, Dr. Aiden, and Crash Course. I'm not going to go into detail about each of the channels, but I'll show you a sneak peek of Mr. Brough's channel page, which you can check out yourself, of course. He has lots of useful analysis videos about different texts such as Macbeth, Inspector Calls, etc. Another important tip, online literature websites. As I mentioned before, I used SparkNotes, and I still use it for lots and lots of my resources. As in, I use it to make my resources like flashcards, notes, etc. That's because they have this amazing section of No Fear Shakespeare for every Shakespeare text, I think almost every, and here's the No Fear translation for Macbeth. So basically over here they translate Shakespearean English into modern English. As you can see, original text, modern text. And this is like the most useful thing you could ever find. Another website which is just as great is LitCharts, and it's by the same creators of SparkNotes, except that they have a different layout, and I think they have more literary text included. And also they have this great feature called Literary Terms, which includes all the literary devices and terms you could possibly come across. And this is the site that I used to make my notes on the linguistic devices, as you saw earlier on in my video. Aside from the literary terms section, there are also other poetry guides. As you can see over here, a pop-up has come up. You can sign up for LitCharts by paying, and then you'll get like free downloads and stuff, and I think newsletters and other things like that. Now, another site which I feel most people don't know about is BBC Bitesize. So many people might underestimate this site because at first it's confusing to navigate, but it's quite easy. Just go ahead and choose your level of education. I've chosen GCSE. It doesn't matter when it says, England, Wales, etc. It's just trying to, I don't know what it's trying to do, but it doesn't matter. Then you can choose Edexcel, AQA, etc. and you get your content. That's what matters, the content. Because they have like really nice illustrations in the middle of all the text analysis, etc., which helps you to visualize, and it sticks in your brain then. So that was it. That's how I started revising for literature, and I hope you find some of my tips useful. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.